and then we're going to get to Carson Beck because I know Mo Hussein's on it big. We saw the TVD experience. We talked about this on the Sunday show, but we saw the TVD experience. He had plenty of time. I think Beck had plenty of time in this game, aside from that third INT on fourth down when McCoy got beat in right off the snap. I think that was really McCoy's fault for that interception. Other than that, he did have a lot of time. The pass protection was there, and we were still seeing picks. We were seeing picks on situations where Louisville knew we were passing or playing the pass, and all of that, Pete, is going to bring back memories of TVD in 2023 when he had excellent protection and teams basically just dared him to pass and be patient and got in his head, and he became a turnover machine after his 4 INT performance against Georgia Tech, which was around this time of this. That was on October 7th. So, around this time of the calendar. That to me is the worst case scenario. You see Carson Beck get in his head. He's going to get a lot of outside adversity just in terms of people kind of doubting him. You hear some of the Canes fans here, which we'll get to right now. If he lets that get to him and then becomes someone who's turnover prone and goes into a shell like we saw with TVD, this season can go off the rails. If he responds starting this week against Stanford, then SMU, a defense that hasn't played very well this year, you could see him get back going. I think he's someone who's got a lot more banked credibility than TVD. He's won a lot more games, 29-4 as a starter. Would love to get that to 30-4 this week. And then somebody who has a much better relationship with his teammates that I've seen than TVD. So I think go in that direction, but it could happen.
And I think he's got a little bit more fire in his belly than TVD. And really, not that TVD had a lot on the line. Obviously, was fighting for at that point. Some people had him as a he was mocked highly. As I said at the time, he was never, from the scouts I was talking to, actually considered a first round pick at that time. Was really like a third rounder. But Beck with the external noise, and I think, unfortunately, as I said on Saturday, the body language stuff was not great, right? So like some of the stuff, whether you want to say it was Lofton's fault, he ran the wrong route there, whether he didn't see certain things, right? And you got to give Louisville's defense credit, but I think he can control what the body language stuff is, and I think that rubs off on the teammates. So it's very cliche, but he's got to control that stuff, I think.
Yeah, no, it's cliche for a reason. It's true, and I think I'd bet you the coaches are telling him the same thing. Nashville, Morning D. Sun came up. Canes a top 10 team. Every game a playoff game from now on. Let's ride. Yeah, that's the biggest difference, I think, of the season is that all these random ACC games, instead of just kind of like worrying about like, hey, is this player going to have a big game? Is this going to happen? Now it's like, man, are we going to win? Must-win kind of scenario. So that's why I made that post on CanesInSight that the biggest thing that's changed is my anxiety because it's a one-game season every week, which they say it is every week, but there was a little bit of cushion, and that cushion is gone. Mo Hussein says, where's his arm talent for Beck? You kept telling us about all summer. He has a noodle arm, no horsepower in his throws, no legs, no zip. He has to check down. I mean, I've seen him make some pretty strong throws. I don't think that was the issue as much as, maybe throwing late on some of his downfield throws. But really, a lot of it was Louisville making spectacular plays and then him, to me, making bad decisions, more so than just arm issues. But I don't know what you're seeing there, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, the arm doesn't look. I think he has. It's not that his delivery is like elongated, but it's kind of slower. Like it doesn't just fly out the way that he kind of like he doesn't flick it that way. It kind of comes from the trunk and the base of his body. It feels like so. That's what from what I see as a very elementary quarterback understander. Like I think it's part of how big he is in his throwing motion. I just think he's a step. He was a step slow on some of these reads the other night. Tried to force obviously balls into coverage, and really, I would say the thing that's been more disappointing than anything with him for me has been I thought he was more. I mean, we saw how he was taking off and running. He did not look as athletic as I've seen. I saw on Georgia tape, and I've seen, and heard really because he just didn't. He didn't look like he was moving with much juice. Now, I will say, and I said this, I don't know if I said it before, but he ran pretty physically in that USF game. And I think they kind of had to scale him back a bit because he was taking some shots in that game that could be avoided. So I don't know if that was in the back of his mind also, D.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Because I've heard that it's something they've had to make sure that he understands how valuable he is for the situation, because we've said it before. We cannot have this thing devolve into what we saw with TVD, because there's not much behind him.
Yeah, and I think on the runs, and I have to go back and watch, but I think a lot of those runs were like on 3rd and 10, like 3rd and 9 and stuff like that. Like, that to me is the fundamental problem with this Louisville game, is the offense that we want to play with Carson Beck, with our running backs, that was very successful against in all these big games, all these rivalry games. And look, they weren't 50-point offensive performances, but the offense did what they needed to do to win those ball games. So that was the point of those. The offense is there to win the game, and they won those games. It was not like these were 3-0 type wins. I think the thing with our offense is that it is all about, and I said this a few times, it sounds like a broken record, but it just has to be said. This offense is about controlling down and distance. That is the point of the offense. And what that means is when it's 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11, let's say, 2nd and 12, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 9, you're not seeing the offense at where it wants to be. I mean, really no offense is designed for that, but Miami in particularly, that is not where Miami wants to be. They want to avoid losses. That's why the running game, which drives people crazy, is so conservative. That is why they do the things they do, is to set up those easy 3rd down conversions, 4th down conversions, which they do pretty well, especially when it gets short. They just run it right through. Louisville's offense isn't that much different, quite frankly. They do it through the passing game more so than the power running game, but they're also a lot of, paper cuts, controlling down and distance, which they did to us all day before Chris Bell then breaks a big one. But when you have so many penalties and you struggle to run the ball like we did, you get to those 2nd and 10s, 2nd and 12s, 3rd and 10s. And then I think Beck is really very limited in that way, because he's not the kind of runner that's going to run for a 10-yard gain. Like Cam Ward could do that sometimes. The running quarterbacks can do that pretty regularly. Beck, I think his legs come into play when it's like 3rd and 4, right? And he just has to kind of run through it if he's uncovered, as more so than, getting 10 yards. I think once we get to that 7 or 8 yard mark, they close in on him, and we've seen that happen a few times in this last game.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that would be something that caught me a bit off guard, man. It just didn't seem like he had the same juice there. But like I said, could be a mental thing as well.
And look, my personal view of Beck, it's one of those things. It's never so high as it looks, never so low as it looks. With that said, we've seen collapses of quarterbacks. Ja'Cory Harris, TVD, those are two that stand out because they were really kind of interception-driven collapses. Beck right now, 4 INTs, 0 touchdowns. Obviously, his stats don't look as good with the 11 touchdowns and the 7 picks. He is still averaging 8.5 yards an attempt, which is not bad. I think over the next few weeks, he wants to get that closer to 9, which would be pretty good. And certainly limit the turnovers. So Stanford, we know what the story is here. I'm just pulling up Stanford's game logs. You can see some of these defensive performances. Did a nice job against Florida State, which had been a good offense before Miami kind of beat them up a little bit. But this is not a good Stanford team. Virginia put 48 points on them. SMU put 34 points on them. BYU 27 points on them. Hawaii 23 points. Their defense actually has not been the worst part of the team. They've been pretty tough relative to their offense. So we'll see. It's not going to be like just a lay down, but man, they are extremely beat up, and they're playing a Miami team that you hope is motivated. Just looking at the rankings, 81st in scoring defense, which of course is not great, but their offense, where they're at right now, offense 107th, 19 points a game. So this is if you're going to pick on what part of the Stanford team is most vulnerable, it is going to be their defense, their pass defense in particular, which is a Stanford problem. They just don't recruit the greatest defensive backs historically. 106th in yards per attempt against. It's early, so I don't want to read too much into those stats, but I think that's just pretty much a consistent Stanford problem, just not being able to recruit those kind of defensive backs. Last year, they were 121st in the nation in yards per attempt against. So I think this is a situation where Carson Beck can really get going and improve, pad those stats a little bit, get the confidence back, and do his thing.